hosting serverless applications at a large scale is super expensive. This post reveals us how expensive it is in a real-world use case. So this guy, Peter Levels, he's a famous, successful entrepreneur, and he's famously hosting all his products on a single VPS at DigitalOcean. And recently he revealed his traffic numbers. So I thought it would be funny to compare it with a serverless solution. So if he would move all his infrastructure to serverless, how much extra he would pay. And first, I didn't believe the number that I was calculating. $35,000 every single month would cost it to him. Just to compare, right now he's paying $600 per month for that single VPS. So that's almost a 300 times more cost. So this post went viral and a lot of people were commenting on, well, but you need to manage your own server, like it's some huge deal. And in this video, I want to show you that in 2024, hosting your own server, having automatic deployments for a Next.js app, it's easier than ever. So in this tutorial, we will use Coolify to deploy a Next.js application into a VPS. So here am I at Coolify's webpage. If you're not familiar with Coolify, it's a super cool open source project that helps you have the same developer experience if you're self-hosting as you would with a provider like Vercel. Like, you know, if you used Vercel, you have this nice dashboard where you can manage your deployments, your applications, and all that stuff. Now, Coolify does the same thing, but you can self-host Coolify. All right, so what is a VPS? Stands for Virtual Private Server, and it's nothing else, just a virtual machine running on a physical server somewhere in a data center, okay? And the interesting part is all the cloud services that you are relying on right now is also using VPSs under the hood. It just abstracts this complexity away from you. So let's create a VPS. My choice is Hasner, but you can use DigitalOcean, AWS, and you find hundreds of VPS providers out there. So first of all, we will need to pick a location. A common concern that people have with self-hosting is that this is not running on the edge, so it's not close to my users, and this way my application will have less of a performance. But let's think about this for a second. If my application is in Europe and your user is in US, now this will mean 100 millisecond, 150 millisecond extra delay for every request. First of all, this is not a huge number, and second of all, even if you have an edge location with a serverless environment, you're running on edge, you will still need to reach out to your centralized database, which is hosted, let's say, in US East. And if your user is in Europe, then your server needs to do many round trips back and forth to the US and back. So just on its own that you are using edge, it doesn't mean that your application will have less performance. So as a general rule of thumb, don't stress about location. You can just pick Europe or US East. Your database will be hosted on the same machine, so it won't take many round trips. Maybe your application will be even faster in a self-hosted machine. So for me, I will pick Europe for now. The next step is to pick an operating system. Also not very important at the moment. I'm familiar with Ubuntu, so I will pick that. Now, the CPU type is an interesting conversation. Now, the difference here that these virtual machines are running and assigned to the same resources under the hood, right? So the same CPU core, which means if I have an application that I deploy and you have an application that you deploy, maybe we are using the same physical CPU on this data center server, right? So in that case, if your application is running some heavy operations, then this means my application will have less CPU at its disposal, so the performance would be less. So this is usually much more cost effective than having a dedicated CPU for your application. But if you are running high loads, then it's generally advised to use a dedicated vCPU. For you, I would recommend to go with the smallest dedicated vCPU, which is 15 euros per month. And with this, you can host databases, Next.js applications, and multiple of them. But it's also not a huge deal if you just pick a shared vCPU. For the sake of our testing, I will pick a shared vCPU machine, the smallest one. I just jumped through all the other options because I don't care about it at the moment, and I will name my server test. I will create one. Alright, when my server is initializing, I will need to SSH into my servers. If you're not familiar with SSH, it means opening a remote terminal into your server. So you can execute commands the same way as you could do in your command line locally. Now to do that, I will need the IP address of this machine, and I will go to my terminal and SSH to this IP address. All right, I verify my key and I'm in. I know that it looks scary. We are now inside this VPS. But the good news is we don't need to do too many things. We just need to execute one command from Coolify's web page, which will install Coolify on this machine. And once we did so, and this will take a few minutes, what Coolify will do is spin up a web server that you can access from your browser, and you will have a nice UI where you can manage and configure everything you want. So we'll be back in a few minutes while this finishes. Meanwhile, it's still not finished, but I wanted to mention what you see here. You see that there is a lot of Docker images pulled. This is because Coolify is using Docker under the hood to host anything. So everything runs in a container, including the Coolify instance that will run on this machine. Alright, I'm back, it's finished. It was around 2 minutes, and you see a URL here thrown by Coolify, and this URL will lead to the dashboard that I was mentioning. So if I open up in my browser, you see this nice UI. Now it prompts us to create an account. I want you to understand one thing. This is not creating an account on a third-party service at Coolify headquarters or something. All this what you see here is running on our own machine, and this is just used to identify you so later you can sign into your own VPS through Coolify from a web browser. So just fill this out. After hitting the register button, you will be welcome to the Coolify dashboard. You click get started, next, and here is the first concept we need to understand: a server. A server refers to the VPS that we set up. It asks us, where do you want to host all your other applications other than the Coolify instance? And for now we will just host it on the same VPS machine, but Coolify also offers you an opportunity to create a new machine or multiple machines where you can deploy your other applications. So that would mean you would run your Coolify server on one VPS, and you can have other VPSs where your other applications would run. But as someone who's just starting out, I would recommend going with the localhost solution. This means everything will run on our own VPS. Now, the next concept is a project. A project is nothing else, just a namespace to organize your deployments. I will create a new project. It's automatically created in the background. And the last step in the puzzle is the resources. Now, this will be more important, but I will just hit let's do it and explain later. Now we see the dashboard itself. If I click through this real quick, I see that I have some projects, which is called my first project. This is the project that is by default created by Coolify. Then we have servers, which is localhost. This is how Coolify calls the server that it's running on. It refers to our VPS that we just set up. And if I go to projects and go to the resources tab, I see I don't have any resources. So this is a good moment to talk about what a resource is. If I create a new one, you will see a lot of things here. So a resource is a containerized application that is running inside Coolify. And what you see here is you can pick different sources on how to build this container that Coolify will host eventually. These can be databases, this can be a Next.js application, this can be a Redis server, this can be really anything that can be containerized. So you can connect Coolify to your GitHub account, to your repository, and it will automatically pull the commits and deploy. You can use a Docker file, or you can even use prepackaged applications like a Postgres instance, Redis, many other databases, and a bunch of services that are just open source software that is by default available to Coolify. It's worth to mention here that you are not limited to this selection. Like everything that you can create a Docker file for, you can host here. So in my case, my Next.js app lives in a public repository. So I will connect this public repository to Coolify now. So this is my public Git repository, which contains a very simple Next.js application. I will copy the address from here, the HTTPS address, go back to Coolify, paste it, and I will see some configurations here. One interesting configuration, what you see here, is Nix specs. Now, if you're not familiar with Nix specs, it's an open source project that automatically detects what type of technology are you using in your application, and it will try to figure out a Docker image that could be built from that. So this happening, everything automatically in the background. So what it will happen, it will pull the repository, Nix specs will say, all right, this is a Next.js application, I will run it with npm run start, I will build it with npm run build, and it will configure everything in the background for you. So this is a really good default solution, but if you don't want Nix specs to take care of this, you can also just say, take the Docker file inside the repository, or take the Docker compose file inside the repository, or you just want to serve it as a static file. So you have multiple options here, but in general, just go with Nix specs, especially if you deploy a Next.js app. So after hitting continue, I see a bunch of other configurations here. For us, none of us matters at the moment, so I will just hit this button here, deploy. So after a few seconds, you will see these logs coming from the deployment process. If you want more details and follow the live build of your application, you go to show debug details. And here you see real time everything that happens inside your container. Right now, Nix specs is building our image. I will switch back to the other mode and we'll be back in a few minutes. All right, I'm back again. The deployment was successful. It was around 3 minutes. One thing to note about Nix specs, that it has this amazing technology where the first build will take time, but because of heavy caching, it will take even seconds to deploy the second round. So now if I would push another commit inside my Git repository, it will build in very, very fast, even in a few seconds sometime. Okay, that was it. We deployed our Next.js application. So head to the configuration tab now. And here you will see the domains section. Just copy paste this domain. It's a temporary domain. You can assign custom domains as well. If I go to this page, you will see that my Next.js app is running perfectly fine here. Now let's go back to the Coolify dashboard, and I will show you a few more settings here. You will see your deployments here. You see this is our first deployment. You can also roll back deployments. You can check the logs from your machine. As you can see, our Next.js app is started and it's running on localhost 3000. And you also have a few other options here. Well, and just to list a few features that you can use in Coolify. You can add more servers if you want. You can assign an S3 storage for your Coolify instance, which will be useful if you want to deploy a database. Coolify will automatically back up the database into these S3 storages. You have environment variables. You can manage your team, so you can invite other developers who will access your dashboard. And again, all of this is running on our VPS. It's completely free. You don't need to pay $20 extra for an extra seat in your Vercel plan. Now the question is where to go from here. I recommend you deep dive into Coolify's docs and also check out selfhost.guide, where I explain all the tips and tricks and concepts you need to know to confidently self-host. That being said, thanks for watching.